Welcome back to a course on limits and continuity. In the previous lecture, we have seen the definition of a uniformly continuous function and several examples and non-examples of uniform continuous functions. In this lecture, we are going to see a theorem on uniform continuity. Here it is given that F is a continuous mapping. Okay, continuous mapping defined from a compact metric space into some metric space Y. So, what is given? Given F is a mapping from X to Y, where X is compact. X is a compact metric space, or simply we may say that X is compact, right? Now we'll have to prove what? We have to prove F is uniformly continuous on X. So this is what we have to prove. Okay. In order to prove uniform continuity, what should we do? We have to choose an epsilon, and based on that epsilon there exists some delta positive such that these things happening. The choice of delta does not depend upon the point, because in uniform continuity we don't rely on a particular point. It is defined on the entire domain. Okay. So okay, this is given, this mapping is continuous. Okay, this is what they have given. So as at the end of the theorem, we may come to a conclusion as a remark that continuous mapping defined on a compact metric space is going to be uniformly continuous, right? The continuity on a compact set is enough to say about the uniform continuous. Actually, we have proved a theorem with the same hypothesis. We have proved another theorem with the same hypothesis, that continuous mapping on a compact metric space into a metric space Y leads to a conclusion that the image set is compact. Okay. Suppose we are given that we have defined a mapping from a compact metric space to any metric space. The mapping, if the mapping is being continuous, the mapping is uniformly continuous, and the image or the range set of the mapping is going to be a compact set, right? Now let us start this theorem formally. Okay, given epsilon positive, or we shall fix epsilon positive. Okay, once we have fixed epsilon positive, what shall we do with the help of the continuity of a function? Okay, so just to recall the ideas, let me use another color to write things. Okay, let me take a point in X. Okay, F is continuous at P means for every epsilon positive, there is a delta which is based on P and epsilon, which is a positive quantity, such that dx of x comma p less than delta will imply dy of f of x comma f of p less than epsilon. So this is based on the definition of a continuity. Here also we have to take these kind of things. Remember, P is the point that we have fixed, and X is the point that we have chosen as a random thing in the neighborhood of P. Okay, actually dx of x comma p less than delta, this means what? In the neighborhood of P with radius delta, we have collected those points. The points in those neighborhood will have to satisfy this condition, right? So the same thing we are writing in another sense, in another notations actually. Okay, since for an element in X there is a positive number. Okay, here how are we choosing this delta? This delta is chosen based on P and epsilon, right? So P plays a role, and instead of writing this as delta, I am writing this as phi of P. Okay, And if I take a point in X such that satisfying dx of P comma Q less than phi of P. Instead of delta, I have taken phi of P. This is just a notation. Okay. This will imply what? dy of f of P comma f of Q has to be less than epsilon. Right. Here, just for the convenience purpose, I am writing this to be epsilon upon 2. Okay, this epsilon, delta, these physically represent what? They are some negligible quantities, right? That negligible quantity can be anything. So I am writing this way, right? This has no special purpose, just for the matter of convenience. Okay, we have chosen this. P is a point that we have fixed in the metric space X, and we have done these things with the help of the definition of a continuity. Now, let me do JP be the collection of Q in X such that dx of P comma Q less than phi of P. In simpler notations, this J of P is defined to be the collection this is what? This is the neighborhood, right? So this is a neighborhood. Since neighborhoods are open, J of P is open. Open in where? This is the collection of points in X, therefore it is open in X. This neighborhood we have found for a single P. In this way we can find neighborhoods for all the elements that is present in X. Hence, the collection J of P forms an open cover of X. Okay, now some of us may have a doubt or need some clarity that why and how can we say this forms an open cover of X. We all know for sure that in the neighborhood, in any neighborhood of a point, at least that point will be there. At least that one point will be there. Be it discrete metric, we'll have at least one point. Right? So for all the elements in X, I am finding some neighborhood, and that collection of neighborhoods is forming an open cover. So every element will be present in its own neighborhood. In this way we get this. Okay, at least that point will be there. So that is why we say that this forms an open cover of X. Now we make use of the hypothesis that X is compact. Since X is compact, there exist some points P1, P2 till Pn such that this X is contained in union union M runs from, okay, let's take it as I or M, it is up to us, so no issues, J of Pm. Right? Now what are we doing is that we are choosing delta to be the half times of minimum of this phi of P1, phi of P2 till phi of Pn. Now you may wonder what is this phi of P1, P2, all these things, right? So for each Jp, we have associated some positive integer J of P. Okay. Don't get confused with the notations that we use. Just have in mind that P is some point in X to which we associate a positive real number phi of P. If it is given as P, it is phi of P. If it is given as X, it is phi of X. If it is given as A, it is going to be phi of A. Right? So, since every compact sets, by the definition of compact sets, that every open cover admits a finite subcover, here the open cover consists of the neighborhoods of the points in X. So we have some points P1 to Pn such that these things happening. Right? So after choosing these things, the minimum one we are taking and half of the minimum we are choosing to be delta. Then I conclude that this delta is a positive quantity. Okay, can we do this conclusion only when this case is finite? When it is infinite, can we not conclude this? Yes, we cannot conclude because here minimum means infimum, right? Infimum of infinite collection of positive quantities may be 0 as well. Whereas when this is finite, it cannot be so, right? So in the finite, one number that is going to be the infimum. Whereas if it is infinite, this may not be the case. For example, you may consider the open interval 0, 1. This is an infinite set. Infinite set consisting of only positive numbers, but the infimum value is 0. This may happen when your quantities are infinite. When it is finite, you cannot. Suppose if you have a singleton 0.5, I mean the discrete set 0.5. Okay, let me write that too. So if you have some thing like if you have some discrete set like this, the infimum is going to be 0.1, which is a member of the set. Or since all the members of the set are positive, the infimum has to be positive, whereas it cannot happen in this case of infinite entries. Okay, the finiteness plays a role here. That is what I was trying to convey. Okay, so this is what we get. Once we have got these things, now let us choose 2 points, namely P and Q in X, such that dx of P comma Q less than delta. Now don't get confused with the P and Q that we have initially taken and here. Okay. In general, whatever may be the point that you choose, you can do those stuff. That is what we have tried. Okay. And among all those points in X, we were able to identify some finite points, and for all those points, we have associated some positive number. The minimum of those positive numbers, half of the minimum that we have chosen as delta. Right? Here, the delta does not depend on the P and Q values that we choose now. Okay? Here you have to be very clear that this P and Q are independent. Sorry, your delta is independent of this P and Q. These may be, this P and Q may be members of this P1 through Pn or may not be. So, may or may not be case you have. In that means your delta is independent of these points. Right? You have these things. Since P is in X, Q is also in X, let us now consider only for P. Since P is in X, this P must be present in one among this, at least one among this, one among these neighbors. Okay, there exists some M where M lie between 1 and n, such that this P is a member of J of Pm. When this is so, dx of P comma Pm has to be less than. Okay. Here what I am doing is that I am choosing this to be half times of Phi of Pm. In this set, I am considering only these sets of points. Okay, I don't want completely. That is what my intention of. Okay, now let me check what is dx of Q comma Pm. Using triangle inequality. Okay, this is the thing that we consider. Okay, using triangle inequality, let me write this as dx of Q comma P plus dx of P comma Pm. This quantity is less than delta and this quantity is less than less than half times of Pm. So we have less than delta plus half times of Phi of Pm, and this one is, of course, this is less than half times of Pm because this is minimum. Okay, from here what shall we do? So this tells you that your delta is going to be smaller than half of Phi of Pm for all 1 less than m less than n. Okay, so this is going to happen. So this delta is also less than half times of every quantity. Here I have Phi of Pm, that is why I am choosing this to be half times of, this is smaller than half times of Phi of Pm, and hence I get this. Right? Once I get this, what am I going to do? Okay, that's what we are going to see now. Now, we are going to make use of the continuity, right? So, just a minute. By the continuity of the function f, now you see what do you have here? This thing, right? And dx of q comma pm is also less than phi of pm. And here, instead of considering this also implies dx of p comma pm smaller than phi of pm. If it is less than half of the quantity, it has to be smaller than that quantity as well. So let me mark this as equation 2 and this as equation 3, and the continuity results, let us mark it as 1. Okay. If you have some point, you can establish those. If you find some point in x, since the function is given to be continuous at all the points, we can do this stuff. By the continuity of f, using 2, 3 in 1, we get what? dy of f of p comma f of pm is smaller than epsilon upon 2, and dy of f of pm comma q less than epsilon upon 2. Right? These two things happened only because d of p comma q less than delta. Okay. Now let me combine these two things that we have here. Okay, which tells you your dy of f of p comma f of q is less than or equals dy of f of p comma f of pm plus dy of f of pm comma f of q. This quantity is epsilon upon 2 and this quantity is epsilon upon 2. So finally what you have is dy of f of p comma f of q is smaller than epsilon. Hence, dx of p comma q less than delta implies dy of f of p comma f of q less than epsilon. Thus, f is uniformly continuous. This completes the proof. Okay, you will have to pay some attention and go through the proof once again so that you will understand. At once you will not be able to understand the proof clearly. Here, just because we assumed dx of p comma q less than delta, these things happen. That is, the equation in 2 and equation in 3 happened only because we assumed dx of p comma q less than delta. Once you have dx of p comma pm, this distance is less than phi of m, and using the continuity of the function f, we get those quantity. The corresponding quantity in y is the distance between the corresponding quantity in y is smaller than epsilon upon 2, and here here the choice of delta you will have to be very clear so that you can very well apply the definition of a uniform continuity. Right? Now let us see a few more results which I have written already. Let me quickly tell you what is happening here. Right? So you are given a non-compact set in R. Right? You are given with a non-compact set in R. Then you can find some continuous function on E, but the function is not bounded. For which what we have done is that first of all I am choosing a bounded subset of R. Next we are choosing unbounded subset of R. So it is given that it is non-compact now. Okay. If it has to be compact in R, it has to be closed and bounded. So this is bounded, I am taking a play. I may have boundedness or may not have boundedness. Similarly, I may have closeness or may not have closeness. Once I have boundedness but it is not compact in the sense, I am considering some open set. The C has to be an open set. Okay. Next, I said that it is unbounded. When I say something is unbounded, I don't need to care whether it is closed or not. It is not. It is unbounded. Even the set is being closed or open, I am going to get that set to be non-compact. So that way we have split things. Right? So when it is an open set, you can identify some limit point of the set which is not a member of that set. Such type of point we are choosing and we name it as x naught. Okay. Using this x naught, we are defining a function of this form. We may very well check the continuity of this one and see that this function is continuous but is unbounded since your x may approach x naught but is never going to be equal to x naught. For example, we have seen a function already that is 1 upon x in this interval. This is a bounded set but it is not compact. Right? I will have to identify some limit point of this set which is not a member of that set. Such point is 0. So the function what we have here is 1 upon x minus 0. This is what we have considered. I said it is open, so it cannot be open. It need not be open. It is not closed. Okay, it may be open or neither. Right? If you consider some unbounded subset, then the identity mapping will do the requirements. I said you may take E to be this one. Right? If you choose, this will do the requirements. This function is continuous. Yes, of course it is continuous. But it is unbounded. Yes. When your x approaches infinity, you are going to get infinity. Right? That is why. Next is we have a non-compact set in R, the same hypothesis. Then there exists a continuous unbounded function. In the previous result, we have said only about continuity. Here we have boundedness as well. Okay. Here we are considering this function. Right. I don't know about E, but this E is a limit point. Sorry, x naught is a limit point of E, but it's not a member of E. Okay. So, if you can see here, be it any possibly higher values, you to the maximum, if your x minus x naught whole square is becoming large and large, then what are you going to get? Your limit of this thing, your limit of g of x will go to 0. No issues. If it has to be minimum, this has to be large and large enough. If it has to be maximum, it has to be small and small as possible. If your x minus x naught whole square is 0, then g of x attains its maximum. But here, based on the given information, x minus x naught cannot be equal to 0 on E, because x naught is not a member of E. If it is being a member of E, this will happen, that is x minus x naught will be equal to 0 on E will happen only if x naught is a member of E. Since x naught is not a member of E, this cannot happen. When this cannot happen, this function will have no maximum on E. That is what we have said, right? The next example, in the previous next theorem, in the previous two theorems we have assumed E is some non-compact set. Here we have taken it as some non-compact bounded set, okay, which means we can lose only the closedness of E. So this E is not closed. Then you will have to identify a continuous function, but this is not uniformly continuous. Yes, of course, already we have seen an example, that is 1 upon x minus x naught. That will do the requirements. Go through these things once again, and if you get any doubts, you may post it in the comment section or you may write to me in email. Thanks for watching.